feel to it. And then it's just the standard Apple Pencil with a little squishy thing on it because I grip the pencil really hard and I get literally bruises on my fingers. These are just the pencil tips that I've gone through in the past couple of, actually probably about the last month. And then you just got to keep a bunch of extra pencil tips on standby. And the reason why is because this paper texture is great because it feels more natural, like paper, but it burns through the tips a lot faster. Let me think here. I guess that's really it for the iPad setup. Do you guys have any questions on just the hardware side of it?
Any plans on using anything else?
No, not for drawing. Sometimes I'll sketch stuff out like on actual paper, but I find that I've gotten so fast at the iPad, and the iPad has an undo button that I just find it easier. And then of course the system that I'm using for the actual computer setup, I have an M1 MacBook Pro. It's a 13-inch. I got it in I guess the end of 2020. And this thing is a powerhouse. Like, it does all the lifting I need. I know Dave got the brand new M1 Ultra. That thing is an absolute beast as well. But yeah, I don't think this. I mean, honestly, like I love having the Pro. I think it's a little bit faster and the latency is great. You could probably get away with doing everything I'm doing on an older MacBook and like an iPad Air. The thing I'd recommend though is you need at least the Apple Pencil 2. Because the latency and the speed and like how effortless it is, it's like twice as fast as the old iPad. Not to say you couldn't get away with it, but and by the way, when I'm referring to latency, I'm talking about when you draw a line, the longer it takes for that line to show up, the bigger disconnect there is from like that creative side of your brain to just getting stuff out on paper, or in this case, digitally. And so you want to have something that has a very, very low latency so that again, that creative side of your brain is just sort of connected directly to whatever it is that you're drawing. All right. With that, let me go ahead and start screencasting here. Any other questions? All right. So you should be able to click the watch stream button now. So my setup, let me just make this bigger. So this is my setup. It's mostly in Fresco. I'll often go to like Google or I guess using Chrome, and I'll do research for stuff. But this is Adobe Fresco. And the cool thing about Fresco is there's actually a free account. So you don't have to pay for this. It like limits a few of the features, but I don't think I'm using any of the features that would require a pro account. But because I do pay for the Adobe Suite, this is included. So I do get the extra things. I think it's like you get extra storage, you get the ability to comment, you get the ability, I think, to like synchronize across devices or something like that. But for the most part, yeah, you can view all this stuff in Fresco. Yes, there are better drawing apps that are way more sophisticated, and yes, there are drawing apps that are way simpler and way less sophisticated. I find that Fresco, though, has just the right balance, at least for Derp birds. With everything that Cosmo did for like Pendulum, I don't think you could use Fresco. I mean, he might be able to pull it off, but he's probably using something way more high speed like Procreate or something like that. Any questions on the software before I start jumping in? Cool. So what you'll see is I kind of have all of our assets here. I've got sort of an assets videos hype folder, and then I try to organize everything by season and chapters so that I can kind of keep track of stuff. I know that we've recently changed it. Instead of being chapter 4, we went ahead and decided that PRED will be season 2, so I need to update this folder name. And then inside here, I've got a folder for iterations, which is just like all the stuff I've basically gotten rid of and thrown out. And then I've got all of these different attribute layers. And I kind of keep them all together here. And what you'll notice, the common thread here is this baseline PRED that I drew. and it stays persistent throughout all of the different attributes. So let's go ahead and jump in. I mean, what do you guys? What should we draw? I can do something in the front. We can do eyes. We can do another body. We could do a back attribute, a head. What do you guys want to do?
Can you start with the hooligan eyes?
The hooligan eyes. Yeah, I don't mind ripping off like Elrond Ravens because they started it, but I don't want to do anybody else's. NFT.
Do a Millie head.
A Millie head. Can't we do something that's like cool, like actual PRED thing?
You're right,
Let's do
Millie is
something
not cool.
cool.
Fuck
I'd
no.
rather that.
Not gonna put.
You heard it here. Millie's not cool.
How about like an alien come out of its chest, or like a Derp bird hand?
Okay, so like a derp bird, like a derp
do
bird
like a-
coming out of its chest.
You do like a
It's like
flame
kind of like
head.
aliens.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
Or like,
about. Okay,
like a roasted dirt bird.
so like a dirt bird face coming out of his chest. All right, I got one. Anybody else? Is that what we're going with, or does anybody else want to throw something out there?
Could you do like a flame head on top, or something
Plane,
like
like airplane,
that? What's that?
like plane is an airplane.
No, like flames, like fire hair or something like
Oh, flame. Well, I kind of did something like that already. There's a lot of stuff you guys haven't quite seen yet. Wrong.
that. All right.
Let me show you what it looks like, and you can tell me if this meets what you're talking about here. Let me turn these other guys off. Something like that.
It's like a mohawk.
Like a mohawk.
Yeah.
I was thinking like
Yeah.
like fire though.
You know, yes. So here, let me kind of show you some of the restrictions. So let's jump into that. So what I'm doing here, and by the way, if you open up Fresco, you might notice that your interface is reversed compared to mine. I just have mine in left-hand mode, and you can change that into settings. So if you go to app settings, I have my toolbar set to the right-hand side. None of this is really going to matter to you guys. You can export as PNG. Restore settings. There's also a time lapse. Now this is really fascinating. Every single PRED asset that I have drawn is time lapsed, which is
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, it's nuts. I also have my input set, of course, to Apple Pencil, and then you can change the double tap. I just have it switched to eraser. And if you can see my screen here, a double tap on the pencil is, as you're holding it, you just literally double tap on the pencil itself. And you'll see me kind of bouncing around through that very quickly. Let's see. Style pressure. I'm not going to get into all of this. There's a lot of... I put, God, hours into getting the right line weight and styles, but I'll come back to that in a little bit. And then the touch. Basically what I have is, and again, you're going to see this a lot too, is what I do is... it's hard to see without seeing what I'm looking at here. But if you look at where it says gestures only, and then just beneath that it's disable the undo redo gesture, I have that turned off. And the reason why is because if you tap with 2 fingers, it undoes something. If you tap with 3 fingers, it redoes something. So again, as you're seeing lines appear and disappear, it's because I'm just double tapping on the screen. That's the number one reason why it's so hard for me to go back to paper. In fact, even when I'm drawing on the dry erase board or like regular paper, I find myself wanting to double tap to undo because I'm so accustomed to it. And then the nice thing about these pros, of course, is it's got pencil recognition. So I can put my hand on it, I can put my fingers all over the screen, and it doesn't register unless it's a specific gesture or pencil's touching it. Okay, so with that interface explained, a couple more things here. What you're seeing here on the left is my layers palette. And if you're not familiar with layers, this is something that was introduced by, I think, Photoshop back in the 90s, with this idea that any layer that is lower on my list on the left is further away from the viewer's eyes. Any layer that's above that is closer to the viewer's eyes. So I'm going to hide this by just touching the eyeball, turns it off. I'm going to scroll to the top, and I'm going to go ahead and select a new layer. You can see that here. So I'll go ahead and switch my color palette to black. And if I draw something here, then I do a new layer, and I draw something else, you'll see that that is now above that black line that I drew. Layering is critical in managing. I mean, when you're drawing hundreds or potentially thousands of assets, and especially when you're drawing different layers within an asset, you have to be able to separate your colors, separate your outlines, separate your highlights and shadows. A, so that if you make mistakes, you can go back and fix them really easily. But then B, once we get into Illustrator, play a critical role.
But when you was drawing there, you could still see the outline from your PRED on the bottom background layer. Why was that?
That's the
Good
face,
question.
right?
Yeah, good question. So what you're seeing, if you notice this very top layer, I just selected it. I really wish you guys could see where my cursor was in the iPad, but you can't. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner, this guy here is the uppermost top layer. Now this is what I keep on every time I'm drawing PRED assets. And if you haven't already figured it out, you can see that this is sort of my blueprint. This is how I make sure that the perspective stays in line with all the assets. Yeah, go ahead.
So it's sort of like making so when I make music, I'll make like a simple beat rhythm, like a drum thing, and I'll keep that going, and then I'll just add layers on like that, sort of like what you're saying.
Yes, dude. In fact, that's a great way to put it. This is like a metronome, right? It just keeps me on
Yeah.
track.
It's just
So-
it's the base for everything that you're doing, more or less.
That's exactly right. So if I turn that off, you'll notice that I still got this like ghost-like background. I'm going to scroll down to the lowest most layer, and you can see this is my PRED body. I just selected it. And in this case, I have the opacity turned way down, and that way I can focus on the asset that I'm drawing. So let me go ahead and turn that back up. I'm going to click, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, this little gear-looking thing. And you can see that my opacity is 13. I'm going to crank that all the way back up to 100. I can also, by the way, you guys haven't seen any of the PRED backgrounds, so you get to see one now. It's pretty sweet looking with this little like vortex looking portal or whatever.
Yeah.
So this is so I'm going to come back to this, and we're going to turn all this back on whenever we finish this sort of flame head. But for now, I'm going to leave the background turned off. I'm going to leave the body turned down. And the reason why I have the eyes in full opacity is because I want to make sure that when I'm drawing a head attribute, like this guy, for example, I don't want to get anywhere near those eyes because I don't want there to be a layer clash, or I should say an asset clash. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my guides. I've got my opacity down. I've got my eyeballs here in full sight. And I'm going to go into the next thing, which is the Derp color palette. I don't know if you guys knew this, but everything about our project is restricted to the Derp color palette. And when I say everything, I mean like your colors in Discord, the website, and of course, all of the tokens. Now, I'm going to click on, if you see this little pink circle on the sort of right-hand side of my screen, I'm going to tap on that. And you can see that I've got a few different themes that I've created. In this case, I have a Dirt Birds theme, which has 125 colors in it. Oops. Close this. And so it starts off with my grays at the top, then my cyans, blues, purples, violets, pinks, fuchsias, reds, oranges, yellows, greens, or excuse me, limes, and then teal at the very bottom. There are 10 colors, or I should say 10 hues within each of these colors. And this is it, guys. If I can't draw it with these colors, then number one, it doesn't get included. Or number two, what I might do is use some sort of opacity. In other words, trying to think here. If you guys remember the Lunars head that I did with the collab and Derplings, I didn't have that like fire orange color, so I actually had to do a blend of the red and orange. and I essentially just did an orange layer. I added the red on top of it, and I added the opacity, and it gave it like that perfect. Is that a question or is somebody just moaning? Cool. Any questions on the color palette? Okay. There's
Kinda
another.
do.
Huh?
I kind of do.
Yeah.
What's the difference between gray with an A and an E?
Dude, that's a great question. I don't know. Yeah, thanks, Paul. So let me show you guys another really cool. Oh, looked it up. Both common spellings, the color between black and gray is more, gray with an A is more frequent in American English, whereas gray with an E is more common in British English. There you go. There's the difference. As my Filipino friend once said, English do sucks.
What's this that
So
stripes have both?
I didn't hear it. Now, if you look at the very top of my screen, or excuse me, the top of the color palette, let me close the color wheel here because I don't need that. If you look at the top of this, you'll notice in the upper right hand corner, I had this like grayish looking color and this greenish looking color. Now, these are really critical colors that you will never see in any of the Dirtbird assets. So, for example, if I turn this up right now, this is sort of a, I don't even know what to call this, like a cool blue color. You guys will never see this on Mint Day. This is a really nifty way. This is how we actually control the NFT colors. Who do I have to mute?
Crypto bag.
How do I do it? Oh, God. I don't feel right now. Can somebody else mute or do I need to do it? All right, figured it out. Cool. So what's interesting about this particular gray is here. Let me take one step back. So I'm gonna go back to this color wheel. Does it even show it in here? Probably doesn't. No, it doesn't. Okay. So every digital color on the internet uses what's called a hex code. This is a 6-digit code that represents, I don't know, 256 million colors, I believe. So if I were to set the color to all zeros, for example, 000000, that means absolute black. If I set that to FF, that's absolute white. Why am I telling you this? Well, what if I have a specific hex code color? I can share that color with Chapman, the Geek Derp, and I can say, "Hey, man, I need you to replace anything that has this bluish gray with this list of colors," and that's how our Derp token colors get generated. Same thing with this green. Anything that I color that has this green color is our sort of secondary Derp color. And I can just tell Geek to say, hey, anything that has that, automatically throw that in the scramble. So for example, if I look at this little face mask, when you guys see this, these face masks are going to be all kinds of different colors. You're going to see them in gray, white, teal, fuchsia, the whole gamut, because I set it to that green color. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Cool.
really does, yeah.
And you could do this with multiple assets. So Cosmo, for example, I'm going to use Pendulum a lot just because it was our partner, but Cosmo, I think, had like 7 or 8 different color masters that would automatically swap depending on the asset. Okay. So, yep, was there a question? Hmm. No, that'll work. Yeah. Should I just get started? I mean, can I keep going? Cool. All right, sweet. All right. There's another. So I just kind of talked about colors and how like the critical role that those colors play. As we start drawing, I'm going to show you guys just my thought process, how these pieces fit together. But the next thing I want to cover is line weight. And as, janky and hand-drawn as Dirt Birds look, there is something I've been extremely disciplined about from the very first drop, which is maintaining line weight. And I'm not saying that projects who don't do this look like shit, or I'm not trying to bash anybody who doesn't do this, because it's just a different style. In my mind, when Dirt Birds came to fruition, I always thought of it like it was this coloring book that like a kid was sort of playing with, like playing with Legos or some sort of game that was happening. And in order to maintain this look and feel, you'll notice that my lines, every one of them has the same end. It has the same width throughout. The lines never change thickness or diameter or depth. In fact, here, let me just turn on this little cool snake head guy. Turn off the guide so you can see him. So you'll notice that it all stays the same. Unless I'm actually trying to do something that's going to create some sort of depth. So you'll notice, wrong pen. You'll notice that I've got this extra line here. Turn this back down to 5. This little shadow down here next to the eye. And the reason why is because this snake is supposed to be sitting on top of the head, so I wanted to give it a little bit of extra dimensionality. But other than that, the lines stay the same. Now I just did a lot without really describing all that. So you'll notice inside my whole layers palette, I double tapped on the snake head. And by doing that, I was able to sort of break down all of the different layers that are inside just this one snake. So I've got my shadow at the bottom. If I turn that on and off, you can see it. I've got the highlights. I've got the shadow, the eye, and of course the base snake. And then, of course, for those of you that are just now joining or whatever, because I colored the snake of that same bluish, cool blue, gray color, anytime we do the rolls on PREDs, let's say we get a bright pink PRED that comes out, well, this entire snake is going to be bright pink, which I can't wait to see because I haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to go ahead and start on a new layer, and in the upper right-hand corner, you'll notice that there's 3 different tools here. There's 3 paintbrush looking things, and again, this is going to be probably over some of your heads and way under some of you guys, but I'm trying to do my best to break this all down. The upper rightmost brush is a bitmap based brush, and what that means is that if I draw something and I zoom in, you're going to notice that everything that I just drew comes out as a little bit of a square. Any image that you take with your camera on your phones and you zoom in, this is how most photos are handled, or I should say most digital content is handled, is using bitmap based tools that rely on one square at a time to fill out the page. Now, as you'll notice, as you zoom in and out, of course, if I were to zoom way, way, way out, it looks like a normal squiggly line there. I'm going to go ahead and clear this layer. But then you'll notice something different, whereas with Dirt Birds, no matter how far I zoom, those lines never become pixelated. I'm only limited to the pixels that of my viewing screen. So like if some of you guys are on a monitor, for example, that's not 4K, like it's a 4K or it's a 1080p monitor, you will probably see more of those square edges. What is this? What type of brush is this? This is called a vector brush. And instead of using little squares, a vector brush uses mathematical coordinates to plot every single shape that you're drawing. I can't show you those mathematical coordinates in Figma because that program isn't set up for that. But when I get into Illustrator to do the line cleanup, again, you're going to see that this plays a critical role. Why is this important for Dirt Birds? Well, the reason that we use vector artwork has numerous advantages. Number one, I can manipulate this vector art after I've already drawn it. So imagine taking a photo and then going back and being able to actually adjust the photo as you are still there. Number two, I can control this with code. We all know computers speak in math. So the fact that I'm drawing in mathematical coordinates means we can start doing things like animating layers, or as I just mentioned, the whole color spiel, we can go ahead and swap out colors based off of different parameters. So my recommendation, if you're not used to, if you're starting from scratch, or you haven't really messed around much with vector artwork, do some tutorials on YouTube. I mean, really get good at it, because that's going to be the core. And in fact, the majority of the NFTs that you see out there, even from Bored Apes Yacht Club, in fact, even like the Pixel Buds or whatever that was, even that's vector art. Even though they're trying to make it look like it's bitmap based. Any questions on bitmap versus vector before I move on to brush weight? Cool, didn't think so. Oh, so it came off mute. Anything? No. So the next thing is, inside this brushes palette, I have favorited this round 5 pixel brush, and this makes sure that anytime I'm, if I'm bouncing around doing other types of illustration work on the iPad, I can always come back, and whatever I end up drawing always looks like it was drawn, around the same day or had from the same artist. And so I'm going to kind of go over some of these settings here. I've got roundness set to 100, my angle set to 90. I don't have any tapers turned on. I do have a little bit of velocity dynamics turned on. Although I guess it doesn't no, I don't. I have it set to 0. I was like, why did I even have that checked? I can probably just leave it unchecked. And then stylish pressure. Because I'm not changing the thickness at all of my line weight, this doesn't really matter. But what you could technically do is you could say, the harder you press, the thicker the line gets. I specifically had that turned off. And the reason why, again, is because sometimes I'm like, I'm holding my breath because I'm getting some sort of perfect angle, and sometimes I'm moving really fast. Regardless, I want to make sure that the line weight remains the same throughout. And then the last thing is, I guess I should have started with this. I set my artboards to 2000 by 2000 pixels. That is massive. This is why your tokens look so damn sharp when they're coming through on Pool PM, and of course when you download them. Just to give you something to compare to, a typical website image hero will cap around like 1200 to 1600 pixels. So these tokens are designed to be blown up, zoomed in, looked at on all different types of devices. So artboard is set to 2000 and my line weight is set to 5.0. Interesting fact, Dirtbirds was set to 15. So when we talk about this whole high fidelity 2.0 Dirtbird, I guess if you wanted to put a number on it, you could say that PRED and Drapes and eventually Derp 2.0 are going to be 150%, because it's 2/3 the size or a third of the size that I drew Dirtbirds with. It doesn't really. I mean, this is so nerdy, and part of me is kind of embarrassed for even going through all this. But the reason why this is important is, look at the detail on the snake eye. If I were to try to do that with a 15 pixel or a 15 point pen, it's going to be really difficult to get in there and do those intricate details. Likewise, 5 pixels or 5 points is huge. If you were to compare this to like Cosmos, like go back and look at a pendulum drawing, and his line weight is almost invisible because it's so high fidelity. Again, I'm trying to go for this sort of coloring book, big fat marker, a kid coloring this in type of feel. So I like the idea that everything looks sort of like a dry erase poured marker, but that's just the style of Derp. So I'm going to set this back to 5, and then there's one more input I'm going to show you guys here, which is smoothing. I mess with this a lot. Smoothing, I'm going to crank this all the way up to 100. Actually, no, I'm going to crank this down to 0 first to show you the difference. I'm going to try to draw the straightest line that I can with just freehanding. And you can see how squiggly that is. When I turn smoothing all the way up, this is my cheat, because I can go even faster, and look how straight that is. Now this not only applies, by the way, I just did the double tap to undo, in case you're wondering how things are disappearing. Not only does that help me with straight lines, but it helps me with things like circles or eyeballs. Helps me with curves, like if I want to do tentacles and whatnot. So I like to use smoothing when I'm trying to draw something like, well, this snake, for example. But in the case of fire, I don't want something smooth. I want something very like jagged and rough. So I'm going to go ahead and let me delete this layer, start a new layer, make sure that I'm on my vector. I've got 5.0 turned on. I've got smoothing turned all the way off. I'm going to turn my guide layers on. And just so you guys know, this right here is my center line. That should split PRED's face right down the center. So anything that I want to do to make it look like it's centered needs to be on this line. This secondary line, this is the side of his face. And of course, the other lines in between are just there as my guides. So in the case of fire, my guess is that we wanted to kind of split it. I mean, I don't know. You guys tell me. I was just thinking like Mohawk fire. Does that sound fair?
Sounds good.
Mohawk flame. Okay. So this is another thing I'm going to do to cheat. Sometimes I feel bullish and I go ahead and I draw the final asset on the first try, but I rarely get to that point. So I'm actually going to draw another guide layer. I'm going to start by turning off my PRED body, or at least turning him way down so that it's out of the way and I'm not getting distracted. Then I'm going to take this next guide layer. I'm going to turn this down to, I don't know, that's fine, 48. Now what I'm going to do is just a very rough version of what I think this fire could look like. So if I get up to the top of his head, I know that right around this point here, whatever's happening is going to disappear behind his head. In which case, everything from about here can be jaggedy. And then once I get to the top of that head, I'm going to kind of smooth it out and blend that in with the back of his head. And that's about as far back as I want to go. Alright. Now I want the fire to go straight up, because flames, it would look weird if it wasn't going straight upwards. So now I'm going to probably do some just quick vertical lines to make sure that, okay, that's looking good. And in my own experience with fire, it typically comes in, you know, three or four colors. You have like your white, and then it goes to yellow, and then it goes to like an orangish, and then red at the top. So we're gonna just kind of like wiggle my lines up, and I'm trying to follow these vertical lines. And you can see how turning off my smoothing really gives me that sort of jaggedy look that I want.
It already looks like it might turn out pretty dope.
Yeah, this will be a fun one. I'm gonna kind of do a little bit higher. This one's gonna go a little further back.
Cam.
Boom. Maybe this is gonna, you know, okay. Let's make it huge. We'll go all the way off.
Let's fucking go.
Okay.
That was pretty cool.
If
I like
you've
it.
got a question, go for it, mate.
So yeah, let me turn this down. Go ahead. What's that?
It wasn't a question. I was just going to say flames don't always go up if it's a windy. They'd be going backwards. Is what I was going to say. But
Yeah.
No,
So that's
windy
a good
flames.
point.
good
Let's
point.
go.
No windy PREDs.
Windy flames.
Oh come on!
Windy flames all day.
Well, there is another stylistic approach. I'm going to turn off this layer. I'm going to go back to another. So let's try a different layer, and you guys can tell me which one you like better. So another version could be. So let me do my base. Whatever. Another version could be something that's way more stylized, kind of like, you know, those old muscle car looking things, where it's more like or tattoos or whatever.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about. That looks pretty cool too.
When
Oh,
Flame
yeah,
Head
I
was
see exactly
mentioned,
what you're
I was kind of thinking like Ghost Rider, kind of Marvel Ghost Rider. That's what came to my mind.
Sick. Okay, so then in that case, watch this. I'm going to take over my screen, share my screen. Go back. Screens. All right, I'm going to share my entire screen here. So you guys should be able to see this, yeah?
I can just see the drawing still, mate.
You can't see my desktop screen?
There's another view now you can switch to.
Yeah, just click the other button there. So this is one of the limitations of Dirt Birds that I struggle with a lot, and Dave has been pushing me on this because I think it might be time for us to make some changes. One of the things that you'll notice is that if I'm drawing with markers, right? Again, I'm this kid in this little coloring book. I can't draw gradients. And gradient's just a fancy word for things that fade in and out. And one of the tricks with fire, of course, is that you have this sort of I can change the opacities, but I don't but I've tried to stay true to the Derp brand and not draw anything that's going to have like fades. And so what I mean by that is notice how this white color is fading into yellow, and then it sort of fades into this orange, and then it fades into that red. So that makes, or actually, this is a better example. Yeah, that looks badass. Look at that. So notice how we've got all these fades from one to the next. So because we can't do fades, or at least if I'm trying to stick to that sort of derpy drawing brand, I have to stick with really hard edges. But there's a couple of things that I can do to fake that. So let me take one that I think I can draw okay in the derp style. Oh yeah, so this is cool. I like how his head's like scorched. Yeah, let's do something like that.
Yeah, that's sick.
I like the scorched head. I like the just the way the flames are looking on that one. That's pretty neat. This one looks more like something we could probably get away with.
Does that mean you have to do blocks art? There are specific blocks that you can only use specific colours within. Is that what you're saying?
Rephrase the question.
And again.
Oh, see, this is cool. So in this case, the entire flame is looking. All right, sweet. So I've got some inspiration. That's pretty sweet. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing this screen. All right, you guys should be able to see the iPad now.
So Art, real quick, I sent you an image on DM.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's sweet. Yeah, this looks more like a yeah, we could definitely do something like that. It's like an explosion. Okay, so I'm gonna take a couple of these different pieces of inspiration here, and hopefully you guys can still see the iPad.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, we can.
All right, I'm gonna clear this layer, and I'm gonna start over. So first of all, those scorched head. Let's start with that because that's gonna be the furthest down layer. Let's say he's got something like this. Maybe it kind of splits off. It's coming around the backside. Yeah, that'll be cool looking.
What's this, like, cracked head?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's sick. All right.
And then we like the idea that like the whole flame is sort of going up and around. So I'll draw my sort of line here, and again, this doesn't need to be perfect because it's just my base layer. And that's coming off the back of his head.
So you're drawing off the top of your 2000 by 2000 square there.
You got it.
You're not going to see above that, I'm assuming. So you're kind of you're getting your lines in there. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. So all of this stuff up here, all of this is off the artboard, so you won't see that. And we're actually gonna when we pull this into Illustrator to do the cleanup, I'm gonna have to cut all this stuff off manually. Okay, so let's say that kind of some of this, and then I like Toybot stuff that had kind of some of like the cloud explosion shit. Okay, that looks pretty messy, but I'm gonna turn this down even more, and now we're gonna start drawing the actual layer. So at this point, because this fire is a little bit more smooth and not as jaggedy as some of my initial iterations, I'm going to turn my smoothing up, but not all the way. So I think 50 is probably fine. And we're going to start with this first lick of flame here. Okay. I'm going to switch to a new layer. Notice how I put this layer beneath where my flame is, because now I want to get into scorched head. I'm going to take it right up to the line. Right up to the edge of his head. In fact, you know what I'll do? So notice how
that's gonna look sick.
right here is the edge of my head. But I want to make it look like this scorch is actually like sticking into his head. But I can't go like this because then you're going to see this line protruding through when those layers are on top of each other. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to draw the edge of PRED's head, but I'm going to have it come... Actually, I'm going to turn up smoothing for a second. I'm going to have it come up to the edge, and I'm going to extend that line upward just a bit. Then drop it down to the edge. Then pull it back up again. So I'm essentially fabricating a new edge, for his head. Drop down again. Oops, that's too much. Then it opens back up. And then I need to fade this back in. Boom. So you guys will never even know that this is sticking out just a fraction of an inch or whatever. So that it looks like we've got these really sinister looking indentions there. By the way, did you notice how I can barely draw an arrow because my smoothing is turned up so high? If I turn the smoothing down, it's a lot easier. Okay. So I'm going to do a couple more scorched. All right. And just because of those little tiny bumps I added, you can see how it looks like it's chipping out of his head. All right. I'm going to go ahead and fill these in. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn down this opacity just so it's out of the way. And I'm going to go back to my fire layer. Oops. All right. So I've got the baselines working out here. Let me just do the ground or that base of the head coming right out of that split. So I just double tap to switch to my eraser. I'm going to clear this line, double tap again to get back to my pen. I wanted to have this flame kind of licking up right in the middle. And now I want to kind of create some depth here, so I'm going to add a few more little adjustments. And all I'm doing is I'm when I go to fill these layers in a second, I want to have different colors loading in. Somebody messaging me? Oh, yes. What's up? What happened?
This looks pretty damn cool, I gotta say.
Oh shit! Somebody's asking me about derp birds. I'll come back to that. Okay. Yeah, it'll start getting cool once we get the colors in. That'll be the next fun piece. Okay. I think we've got enough here to get ready to start coloring. Toy boy. I don't know if I have. I didn't add any of your like mushroom cloud looking things, but I think this is
Well,
how.
actually, that image was to show how you could do a lot of that cell shading flames.
Got it.
It wasn't really for the explosion. It was just the shading, really.
I'm with you. Okay. And then maybe there's just a little low flame going on here. Let's see. Sweet. Okay. So I've got this outlined. I'm going to go ahead now and kill my guide layer because it's getting out of hand. And I probably don't even need this layer either. And again, this gives me the ability to sort of focus on what I need to draw next. So what I'm going to do is I want to draw this above my scorched head, but below my fire. So I'm going to create a new layer that's in between here. And I'm going to start with this super bright yellow color. And all I'm doing, again, is because I'm behind my layer, my fire layer over here, I'm going to draw in between the lines. Now you're probably asking, well, why not just use my fill bucket over here? So this thing I have selected on the right, I could technically go in and I could just start tapping stuff and fill it in. The problem is, it's fire, and fire is transparent. So I need to make sure that I'm separating these layers, that I can control each of them independently. So I'm going to draw the white layers, but I'm not going to draw them all the way up to where the black line is every time. And I'm hoping this should give me some interesting fades. So let me color this guy. And then again, along the bottom here. Oops. Go.
How often do you find yourself getting like this far in and going, no, I don't like it, and then scrapping that whole attribute?
I did early on many times it would happen, but you know, it gets to the point where this is harder because it's a community vote. So I'm like, okay, I just have to do it. But at some point when you're the artist and there's really nobody dictating what you're supposed to draw, like you just sort of draw whatever you feel like. There are times when Dave's like, no, that looks shitty. But for the most part, I don't know, man. If I were to give you a number, I'd say maybe 1 out of 20 gets rejected, and I'm like, yeah, that looks like shit. In fact, I'll show you one of the bodies that.
How did Wendy's make it through then?
Dude, those are cool.
Wow.
I like those.
Yeah, shots fired.
Okay, and now I'm gonna draw a few more white layers in here. And I'm keeping these white layers very close to the other white layers. Actually, I'll do this one here. It's going to be easier to see once I switch to a darker color. I'm sure you guys are... It's hard to see what I'm doing here. Okay, I'm filling all these pieces in. Okay. Great. So I'm going to take this fire layer and I'm going to turn it down to 50%. We're going to draw another layer, and now we're going to get into this bright yellow. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that yellow all the way down to where that whitish layer was, but I'm going to go a little bit higher. And it's okay if this isn't exactly perfect.
Just layer it up, like layer after layer?
Exactly.
Okay. Nice. Pretty cool.
I'm going to take this all the way up. In fact, we're going to go all the way over. and all the way down. Okay. Switch this around. So you'll notice I'm following the baseline of this flame all the way across. I'm going to fill this in. I'm going to turn this guy down to 50%. Now we'll draw the next layer beneath it. Now we're going to switch over to, let's go ahead and do orange. And we're going to start again at the bottom. I don't know how this is going to work. Let's see. All the way down at the bottom. And really what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to fake the lack of gradients here. So I'm loosely following my black lines, but it doesn't need to be perfect, I don't think. See how this comes out. Can you guys hear cars in the background or no? No? Okay, good. Hearing Lightning McQueen in the background. Okay.
If you don't mind, I actually just came up with a really neat idea. You got like a lot of empty space on the left there.
Mm-hmm.
What if you put the PRED logo with a little bit of fire coming off of it?
So here is the problem with space over here. That space is reserved for these guys.
Gotcha.
And I didn't mention this, or I probably should have mentioned this. So right around the top of the head, oops, wrong tool. Right around here is where I need to keep whatever I do for the head over in this space, so I can kind of play with all of this. And then whatever's going to come up with these head types need to stay on that left-hand side. And so what's really cool about this is we have some really interesting pieces. So I'm gonna turn this layer off. I love this guy. So again, as long as I keep this head space here, then they don't fight with each other.
All right,
Is that like
cool,
a
man.
mech mask?
Huh?
Is that like a mech mask?
Yeah.
Sick.
And you'll notice the color scheme, right? So
Yeah,
this right here, this is all the gray. This is the same color as PRED, so that when you see like a bright pink, purple, whatever, blue PRED, all of this stuff over here, all of this is going to change colors with it. And then here is my green layer, which means any secondary color that you roll or that you mint is going to automatically change. So this mask is going to have some pretty sinister looking layers. In fact, if you look at the trailer video, you can kind of get a feel for like what those different
I saw
pieces
one.
look like.
One of them looks sick with the
Yeah,
mask.
they're crazy looking.
I like the suit. The one with the suit, actually, I was like, I want one of those.
Oh yeah, it's like a knockoff of the Hitman suit, but not quite.
Yeah.
Like this is one that if you look at it, this is the old Derp Birds line weight that I was kind of playing around with. And I'll even show you. You guys asked about bodies that get thrown out. I thought this sounded so cool in my mind, and then I did it, and I was like, that looks like shit. So you will
Those
not.
almost look like they look like staples.
Like what?
They almost look like staples a little bit.
It looks like he's in IT and got a little tangled.
Yeah, I know. It looks
Also
bad.
that.
We're not gonna use that one. This one will come out cool. So this is neat because now we have that green layer, and again, thing that we roll in that secondary roll, you're gonna have some really interesting color layers here.
Different color of those. That's pretty sick. I see what you're saying.
I think though this one's one of my favorites. Right. Going back to our spider guy. Oh shoot, you know what? I forgot to color these other flames down here. Somebody's got their window down or something.
IQ, you mind muting yourself? Thanks.
Let me combine these guys. Yeah, I don't know if this one's going to turn out. I hope it does. Okay, so what happened there, I do this a lot. For whatever reason, I didn't close the ends of my line, which is kind of a pain in the ass problem. Because if I haven't drawn something that's sorry, let me explain this in English. If I draw a circle and I connect my circle, then I can go to my fill bucket and I can fill that in, or I can fill in everything else around it. But if I draw a circle and I don't quite connect the lines, and then I try to fill it in, it doesn't have an enclosed space to fill. And this is one of the things this is one of the issues I run into, especially when I use a fast tool like this. I'm guessing it's this piece. I hope this fills it. Ah, that was it. Okay. All right. I also didn't mention the reason why I keep the toolbar on the right-hand side is because I'm left-handed. I'll oftentimes use my right index finger to go through and tools quickly if I'm not using the double tap feature. All right, so now let's go ahead and do our bright red layer. Let me turn this yellow back down. Now I know for a fact that red is going to be incredibly what's the word I'm looking for? Like bold or something. Like it's going to really stand out. So I may need to turn this one down lower than 50%. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I might pull this guy down to like 30. Okay, these flames are going to be red. Okay, I think it's all colored in except for this guy right here. And in fact, they make the entire thing. Okay. So let's just do a quick spot check. I'm going to go ahead and right now you'll notice how all these layers are free floating. I'm going to go ahead and combine them, and I'm doing that by I touch for a long time and I drag down. It'll combine these and create a layer group. So I'm now creating a layer group just for my flame guy. This is my old flame, so we're going to delete this one. I'm going to double tap to jump in here. I'm going to turn up my scorched head. We're going to go down to the PRED body, turn him up, and then look at the background. Okay, it's getting there. I don't know how happy I am with this one. Let's pull these whites to 70. Pull these yellows. Color needs to go back up, doesn't it? Okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my top layer and I'm going to kind of add a few more of these guys in here. Poop. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Sorry, my Figma crashed there for a second. There we go. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how much I like this one. Fire is really hard. So you'll notice this is why I cheated on doing this guy. So this one is it. What makes these so easy, and this is also the shortcut I used for all the drape hair, is it's a much more like faceted, angular type hair poof looking thing than it is like something with actual gradients. So I think I'm going to abandon this one for now. I don't think we'll include that one. Oh, I will show you one more little trick though, which is so notice how this looks bad right here on the edge. I never came back and fixed this. This is how we make the PRED bumps. I'm going to go back up, take this gray, I put a layer underneath it, and now all I have to do is color that in. And voila, it looks like we have a cut in his head.
It's safe to say we can call this one out of 20 then.
Yep.
Yeah.
Turn it off. Okay, give me something. Give me something else.
Sorry, y'all.
You're good.
I think it's really good to see the process though of how it's done. That's definitely.
I mean, yeah, that's a big part of it. There's a lot of times where, again, I'll be starting down a path and I'm like, yeah, it's rare that I'll go all the way through to completion on something. I'll give you guys another one. I didn't even realize I hadn't really ever drawn like guns and weaponry like this before, and it turned out I had a lot of fun with these. Let me turn all these off.
Those are all sick. What is that? Oh, is that like a? It looks like a blade with like some like goo on it.
Yeah, this guy here.
That was cool.
It's pretty mean looking.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll go to like I'll do searches for like Borderlands or alien weaponry or whatever, and again just sort of get that inspiration from different pieces. Yeah, a few of these layers are hidden. I took a few little Easter eggs out, but I don't know. Give me something else. What else do you guys want to see? So going back to the front, we've got backs, bodies, eyes, heads, and the little head tenna things. Ah, no, I'm not. I'm gonna give myself something easier. That's one of those. Like, it would take me like 2 hours to agonize over to get it just right. I know it's dope.
You gotta admit, it's really cool.
It sounds. I'll definitely have to include that, but I'm not gonna do that one live.
Aw, fun.
Make the PRED look like a clown.
Y'all really want to mint a clown PRED?
No.
No. So are you actually doing this for something that we will be minting?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. I just thought it was just for showing us and.
No. I literally have until tomorrow night to send Geek the final assets. So whatever we're drawing today live, you guys have the opportunity to mint. Now let me take one step back. You guys know that there's 4 stages of PRED. Stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have no idea the quantity of each stage PRED. So I know we said this, but just again to reiterate while everybody's here, the stage of the PRED does not equal the rarity. It equals battle preparedness. In other words, higher ranked PRED will do better in things like Faction Wars and other games that we have planned. But I want to make sure we're very clear that rarity, as in how scarce something is, does not equal battle preparedness. The reason I'm saying all this is because, in theory, it is possible that 5,000 people could show up with one Derp bird and we only get 5,000 stage 1s. We could also end up with more stage 3s than stage 2s or whatever that looks like. So what we're going to do to create this roll is we're going to create thousands of stage 1s, thousands of stage 2s, thousands of stage 3s, and thousands of stage 4s, knowing that there may be a bucket full of 20,000 pred, and only 3,000 or 4,000 may ever get created simply because of the supply of eggs and the supply of derp assets. What I mean, so getting to my point, when you go and you mint your pred, let's say you end up with a stage 2, you're just going to grab a random pred out of that stage 2 bucket. So theoretically, whatever we end up drawing today may never get minted. We don't know.
So I got an idea. What about a mouth that is like Predator, the movie? It doesn't have to be exact, but something along those lines, where it's got that big wide open with a couple fangs that kind of open sideways like that.
So I learned my lesson on the derplings that if we included mouths, then some of the other headpieces and the antennas are going to cover that mouth. And then people get upset because they see in the metadata, they're like, what? I have the Predator mouth, but I got this stupid mech armor in front of it that I can't even see it. So that's, I mean, so aside from the fact that there's something to me that looks sinister about this pred that's just the eyes, right? Because that's always how anytime we've ever showcased pred, even 5 months ago when he came onto the scene, it was just the eyes. So I've tried to stay away from doing any mouth attributes just because
What if it was part of the head tennas then? If so it doesn't get covered.
Okay. All right. So you're saying. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
I think there's something to be said about being inspired versus copying directly.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, that's every artist ever. All right. So let's take a look over here then. So we got Predator pulled up, and I'll do Stranger Things. Demigorgon. Oh, yeah, these guys look pretty nasty, huh? That's cool. That's what it looks like. It's all closed up. So so the thought process that I'm going through now is simply, if I were to draw something like this or this, how do we make it unique enough to where it's not like, oh, it's Predator, but also it still has that sort of recognition factor that, like, yeah, that just looks mean and nasty. At the same time, especially, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what if it's that style with like the mouth, but instead of having it as a mouth, it's like coming off from behind as a gun. It's kind of like an extending arm or something that's opening up.
Yeah, that could work. I'm also thinking about my other layers to make sure that the ordering is good, and I think we're safe. So it goes like this.
Head antenna, is that like the thing that comes off the side or something?
Yeah, we actually changed the name of it. It's called, oh god, what do we call it? Head type? Or head style? Something like that. Head something. Maybe it's just head. I don't remember what we're calling it. I liked head tenna, but we decided it was too confusing. Yeah, so the order goes, it's the back, then it's the body, then it's the head tenna thing, then it's the eyes, then it's the head, then it's the front. I think we're okay. So let's jump in.
You have it coming off to the left hand side, so as we're looking at it, so it's then kind of just in front of his face as such.
Mm-hmm. Okay. With the dreads too, or no? Although, see, I kind of like how it's like the top of his head has these like this ridge line. That's kind of neat. So let's say I did something. So I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to turn my body down, go back up, turn my guides on, go back to my new layer, and let's say that it kind of starts around this area. Oh no, this is the head tenna. Okay, so that means I've got this space available. So let's say it kind of comes down. Actually, no, it would be more like that. Again, this is just my guide layer, so I'm not worrying about perfecting anything just yet. Cool. Oops. I tapped the back button with my hand. And then it would have the same looking pieces over here. Cool. And then some sort of sinister mouthpiece. I think what I might do is just sort of have these like spiky looking things that come around. And now what I'm looking at is this. This particular line right here is the same line that's on the edge of his mouth over here. So you'll notice that I took these spiky points just past that line. And the reason why is so that I can make sure that those lines carry across just ever so slightly. And then I'll add little bumps. That looks pretty cool. So I'm going to turn this down. Delete this other guide. I'm going to turn the body weight. Okay. Now, because I have a lot of curves coming up, I'm going to turn my smoothing up quite a bit here. And I'm going to start with the longest curve first, since that'll kind of inform the rest of these dread looking things. Okay. Okay, I'm going right up to the edge of that head layer. I'm going to pull this down. There we go. Okay, so you can kind of see I goofed up here because this space doesn't quite work. So I'm going to delete this last layer. Actually, the last couple of these. Keep these guys way out. Okay. Now we're going to... Oop, I don't like this rough edge here. Pull this down. Now when I want to get a really tight eraser, what I'll do is I'll put this way down to like 0.5 and then zoom in. And that way I can get a nice clean corner. There we go. Come all the way out to this point. I think what I'm going to do is kind of make, instead of the, let's see, I could make the edge clean, or I could make it kind of look a little more, just a hair wavy. Yeah, I like it just a little bit more wavy. All right, now last piece for the mouth area. Doesn't be a lot. Nice. Next, we're going to do the dreads. Now, this is interesting because even though these dreads are behind the head, visually speaking, they aren't behind the head in the actual layers. And so, hang on, I'm just going to turn off my screen share on this other one. Stop streaming. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is first zoom in and draw the edge of my head. Oop, not quite. Now I'll go ahead and draw the tentacle thread thing. Thread. Now, one thing I should probably do is, I just realized right now this is on the naked PRED, but let's say he's got some crazy looking thick armor. I might want to make these tentacles a little, make them look like they're maybe falling down a little bit more, so that when this head is paired with some armor, it still looks like it's sitting on top. That one looks like shit. Nope. There we go. Actually, that's probably good. Okay. So now what I'm looking at is I'm going, okay, is this enough? Let me clear my guides here, clear layer. And I feel like the tentacle looking things need something. So if I go back to my predator drawing, I know he's got these like bead things on there. I don't want to copy that too much, but I think what I'll do, especially because right now there's really no other place to put that secondary color, I'm going to add a new layer. And we're going to add a little bit of a, I don't know what, bracelet? I don't know what to call it. You guys hear the dishes in the background or no?
Yeah, we can.
A little, but it's not a big deal.
All right. Sorry, Millau. All right, so we'll leave it like that. And then with this, guys, I'm going to go ahead and color him in. Doot, 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 doot. And then I'm going to throw him on top. Cool. So let's go ahead and color these guys in. And then what makes this come to life is the shadows. So I'm going to add a new layer.
Bottom right.
Say again. Oh, thank you. All right. So shadows are interesting. This is something that I sort of started with drapes, and it's been there ever since. Every shadow is set to 30%. unless something is extra shiny, in which case, when things are shinier, you have a lot more contrast, so your shadows are darker and your shines are lighter. But my shadows have always been 30%. That's what kind of gives us the consistency. And the light source is always kind of coming from this area, from that upper right part of the screen. I'm not perfect at this, and if you guys look, you're gonna go back to my recording. You're gonna find all kinds of flaws where my lighting is horribly messed up. And you're like, well, the light source is. I get it. I know it's not perfect, but you'll notice like even his little eyeshadow here, right? It's sort of coming in this area that there's no light, and in my opinion, this looks very boring. What we're looking at is like, well, this doesn't look like a cool attribute. As soon as you start adding the shadowing, it somehow it connects it with the rest of the derp assets. So there's a couple of things I'm going to do. Number one, I'm going to assume that these tentacles didn't just pop out of the side of his face. I want to make it look like that there's his skin actually has a little bit of a bubble, like it's kind of doing its own thing. Oops. So just by adding this little bit of a shadow line, it's going to make it look like the side of his face is starting to like sort of bubble out to meet those lines. We're going to drop down here. And then there's definitely no light. Again, if this is my light source, then I can assume that it's probably going to come down like this. And I'm going to bend this light around this first spike. I'm going to tuck way in on the face and drop down. Bend around. Drop down. Bend around. Drop down. And then I'll bring this all the way back up. Okay. Okay, I'll fill this in. Oh, see, I didn't close it somewhere. Maybe it's here. Or maybe, no, it's not at the top. Let's see if I got it. Yep, that was it. Turn this down to 30. And then let's turn the body up and let's see how this is looking. It's getting there. So I'm going to go back to my shadow. So now we need to fill in the bottom of these spikes. And we're going to assume that these spikes are kind of wrapping around the face here. Just a bit. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to pull this highlight. Oop, that's too small. I'm going to pull this highlight back even more. That's looking better. Same thing over here. And again, I'm just double tapping to switch between my eraser and my pen. I don't want to overdo it too much. That's probably enough.
I say, like, on the left side, you got 4 pieces of hair coming down. Maybe one more.
You're talking about over here on this side? Oops. Over here?
It's on his left side, he's got 4 pieces of dreads coming down. Maybe just one more to fill it up. It just feels like he's
Alright.
almost a little bald on the
Gotcha.
hair.
So
Oh.
I'm going to go back to my layer here, and let's drop it down from the top. And this will look cool, because it'll kind of look like a little spiral. And then That'll carry through down here. Oops, color. How's that? Ooh, I forgot this piece. Oh no, that's his chest. Okay.
That
We're gonna
does look
keep
better, but I was actually talking about the other side.
that over here.
Yeah, if you could add like one more.
The problem is, the thicker this gets,
Oh,
the
it
more we're
covers the
hiding.
back.
Yep. And that's where it gets because there's a lot of cool like chest armor pieces that are happening. So I've been trying to do a good job at like, the wilder this gets down here, the more we're covering what I would consider some of the most prime real estate of PRED, which is the body.
Okay, so maybe add one more, but make it really thin. I don't know. That's just,
Let's see. Let's see what it looks like with the shadows first. Back. In this case, I'm going to put this entire top piece in the shadow. Ooh, that doesn't quite look right. Let's take a little bit. Okay, we have an important decision to make on this green layer here. There's a couple things we could do. We could make them transparent. We could make them sort of the same color and opacity as the PRED body. We could make them shiny, like metallic. We could make them, I mean, really whatever. What do you guys think? What should those green bracelet things be?
maybe a device of some sort.
Explain.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Maybe give them tentacles of their own.
What? Well, we gotta wrap. I mean, I gotta get this into Illustrator because we're already approaching the. Oh my God, we're at an hour and a half, and I haven't even started Illustrator. I was hoping to be almost done by now.
You could. What about like different colors? All of them different. Well, that wouldn't like match as much.
Be
No, that's fine.
rainbowy.
Can do that. All right, let me wrap these shadows.
Maybe give them like alien space gems on each one.
Base gems. What do you mean?
Like, I don't know, alien gems. Like what would aliens have as
Like
jewelry?
rubies and diamonds and shit.
Got
Yeah,
it.
but like alien version of all that.
Yeah,
Got it.
I got what you're saying. Like kryptonite. Put on it.
Sure.
Got it.
Derpenite.
Yeah, derpinite. More or less.
Sure. Okay.
I don't know how it would look though.
Deptorium.
Yeah, you can see just how easily you add depth just from a little bit of shadowing, which is cool. Well, okay, so we can make them metal, but the reason that they're that green color is so that they'll change with the different color rolls. So what we can do, metal is really easy. I'll show you guys how to draw it.
Make
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Could you make like a weapon device on it and then have it shoot like a laser out?
My God, no, we gotta get this done in like 2 minutes.
That looks sick. I feel you
You know what's funny? If Dave were on, he would tell you the same thing. It's like, man, we have such a hard time because it's like you want every asset, right? You want them all like, oh, this is the coolest. No, this is the coolest. No, this is the best. And this is the best. And then what happens is if everything's special, nothing is, right? And so
Yeah.
you have this challenge of how do we create assets where, I mean, let's face it, some of them just aren't as cool as others, and that's kind of intentional. Not saying I'm trying to make anything look shitty, but the idea is that we want to be able to have that sort of hierarchy.
No, 100%.
It's
Um,
unavoidable.
yeah, exactly. It's tough.
Like
Okay.
imagine every video game, like every enemy was the end boss.
Yeah.
Like I was looking at those A to 8 club things, and there's just too much going on. Like half of them got wings, half of them shooting lasers. Like every one of
Yeah.
them has something crazy. You're just like, yo, this is too much.
Well, and what's crazy is, you guys we're focusing on just this one attribute, and you forget how something's going to turn out until all of a sudden you see it in retrospect with a few other things, and all of a sudden it stands out on its own. Okay, so let me just take a quick step back for a second. So one of the things that I'm noticing is I've got one layer of shadowing, but look how boring this area looks up here on the top. It just doesn't, it just all looks flat. Like there's not enough light hitting that. So now I'm going to go through with my eraser and I'm going to assume where those sort of uh, light source would be hitting it. And because these are round, my shadow is going to be round. And that'll be different when we get to the metallic looking bracelet guys. What I mean by round is this piece here. I'm making these edges, oops, round because the actual shape is round. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and that's looking a little better. And again, if I were to put a lamp on PRED, this is probably not how it would shine, but that's okay. Okay. It's great, I love it. So to make something metal and shiny, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a layer on top of this. And instead of setting these to 30%, I'm going to set these shadows and highlights to 60%. There's going to be a lot more contrast. The other thing, and just kind of draw something real quick. Let's say this is my cylinder. Metal very rarely has just like one gradient shadow on the left side that just kind of looks like. Typically what happens is you have light bouncing off different sources, and so the area wherever that shadow is going to be open, and then you have the shadow start there. So unlike the edges of the tentacles, which go all the way to the edge of my line, I'm going to take this and draw the shadow close to the edge, but not all the way up to it. And this is going to give that metal edge something to bounce off of. Oops. Why isn't it drawing? Hang on a second. Here we go. All right, I'm going to fill these in. Oops. Pull this down to 60. Notice that's a lot darker. And then we're going to assume that there's just a hair of a lip around these things. So that's not just a perfectly straight tube, it kind of like turns inwards on itself. So I'm going to sort of just wrap it around the base here. And then next we're going to do the white layers. Ooh, this didn't quite bend around. There we go. And again, I'm not going all the edges, keeping it just real close. Boom, we've got metal. Okay, now I'm going to do one more thing. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse these layers down, and then we're going to jump into Illustrator. Make that part as fast as we can. Do I have any? No, I don't. I'm going to add one more layer of shadow just to really give these guys some depth. And this is, I don't do this for every attribute, but in this case, I want to have some delineation between this cheek area. So I'm going to sort of come in and come all the way up underneath this guy. Hey, babe.
Yeah, am I talking?
Mm-hmm.
You can hear me.
Mm-hmm. All right. Almost done. Here we go. You can see what a difference that makes. In fact, I'll even come right back around this guy and make one more shadow because he's way back there behind the light. Pull that in. Cool. Have you guys ever heard the quote that artwork is never finished, it's only abandoned? If you haven't,
Yeah.
yeah, that's everything, man. I could
I got
literally.
like
Uh-huh.
I got like 500 files of just like shitty beats.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I could literally I could spend all day on just one attribute. But when we've got 50, 60, 70, hundreds of attributes that have to get drawn, it's like it just gets out of control real quick. Like even this, I'm probably adding a little too much shading, but it looks so good. And then one more here. All right, there we go. There is our PRED dude. So now I have these layers. It's turned on. I'm gonna hit my little export button, and this is kind of the nice thing about having the Adobe suite on your system is I can go to Illustrator and I can say open a copy, Illustrator desktop. And this will take a couple of seconds. If you look in the upper right hand corner, you can see that little spinny icon. That's Adobe Fresco compressing all these layers, getting it ready. And actually, let me share my computer, my other screen real quick. Okay, so it just says document sent. You should be able to see my desktop now. And then you're going to see this little notification in Illustrator that pops up that says, hey, do you want to open this up in preview mode? Give me a second. Let me log out of Discord on here. Okay. So I'm going to hit the OK button and open this up. And what you're going to see, let me close this guy out. All right, so this is everything I just drew in Illustrator, and it's already broken up in those layer groups. So the same layer groups that you're seeing in the upper right-hand corner are the same ones. Actually, you guys probably can't see this. Give me a second. Let me make my screen size a little bit easier to read. All right, is that easier for you guys to see? Hopefully. All right. So what I'm going to do is take this layer group in the lower on the bottom ones, and I'm going to turn them off because that's not what we're worrying about right now. I'm going to open up this layer group, and this is where it gets really crazy. Every single line that I drew, including all those black lines, I've been tracked in Illustrator. So I can go through all of these, and I can select them. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them into one shape. As of right now, you can see how all these shapes are disjointed. They're all different pieces. Again, I can pull this off because this is the vector line art that I was talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up my Pathfinder tool, and I'm going to unite these shapes. And as soon as I do this, you'll notice that all those just now blended in and became one piece. I didn't quite capture all of them, so I'm going to keep doing this until I get all of the black pieces. So let's see. It's like there's one. And I have all these guys. Oh, no, that's my shading. I'm going to leave that alone. Okay, there's those guys. I'm going to blend these. Yep. This and this. That and that and that. All one piece. Nope, see, I grabbed something I wasn't supposed to. This, this, this. Okay. So all I'm doing is I'm trying to find all of the black layers, and I'm trying to merge them with this one shape. So I got them all together. And I think I've got it all there. All right, great. So that piece is done. So I've got the black outline. Everything beneath all this, these are just those gray pieces that I filled in, so I can leave those alone. This next piece is my shadows. So I'm going to go ahead and just combine all this into one. And then I'm going to ungroup these layers to see if there's any. Okay, so this is one of the things that, again, I'm not sure if this is the same for every drawing software, but you'll notice these little tiny slivers. When I go in and I make erase marks, you'll notice how these little tiny pieces get left over. While this is probably imperceptible and nobody would notice it, I still like to go through and just delete them. So I'm looking at my layers palette, and I'm just clicking and deleting anything, any sort of rogue element that shouldn't be there. So it's not super time consuming, but it does take a moment to make sure you get all those pieces. You can imagine how long this takes, and you've completed an entire body on something. Okay, cool. So now that's all done. Now we're going to jump into the green bracelet guys. Same thing. I'm going to select all my black layers, convert that into one object. My green layers are fine, so that's good. Now we're going to go into the shadows. I've got all these as my shadow work. I'm going to combine those. Those look good. I've got the 3 white pieces. Those look good. And I've got my final shadow layer, which is on top. Combine that. Ungroup. I'm not seeing any piece that doesn't belong. So this all looks good. All right, last thing I need to do before I'm ready to jump into Figma is I got to cut all these lines off the bottom, because I need to have an exact perfect shape that is exactly 240. Oh, you know what? That's the chest piece. That's exactly 2000 by 2000 pixels. So to do that, I'm going to hit the letter M or the rectangle tool. I'm going to draw a quick rectangle. Actually, I need to be on the right layer here. I'm going to draw a rectangle. Why isn't it doing that? All right, let's try that one more time. There we go. So it's perfectly black. And I need to make sure that this rectangle is sitting at exact point. Any less, and you would see like a little hair above it, and any more, and it would stick out below the artboard. It's really easy to do this. I click the transform button. I make sure that the Y, so that the top of the square, in this case, right here, is sitting at 2000. In this case, it is. I'm good. I'm going to use the Command X to cut this layer. And I'm literally just selecting both layers at the same time. I'm going to my Pathfinder tool, and I'm hitting subtract, or minus front. And I do the next piece. I take these guys with the shadow, and I subtract. And the next piece, these guys with the shadow. One time. Until every single layer has been chopped. Now, oh, see, I made a boo-boo because I went ahead and cut the black line. Let me ungroup this first. There we go. All right, and then all that's left is to export this and save it. So the next part is critical. You want to make sure you're exporting it as an SVG. Bonus points. Anybody know what SVG stands for? Scalable Vector Graphic. So I'm going to go over here to PRED. I'm going to go to my head tenna, and we'll give it a name. Let's call it 13 for now. I'm going to select SVG. I'm going to use artboards, and this makes sure that it captures the whole 2000 by 2000, and hit the export button. From here, these layers don't matter as much because I'm not going to actually be showing this anywhere in a website. If I was trying to build assets for web, then of course this would matter. But in this case, we're just going to dump this into Figma. So these layers are fine. 2 points of decimals is fine. Minify, responsive, all that's fine. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to minimize this. And now we jump into Figma. Now Figma is where we keep all of our asset layers, and again there's a lot of them here that are hidden, so you won't be able to see them all. But I'm going to go ahead and tap New Layer. Head 10 of 14 is fine. I'm going to delete everything that was in here. We're going to go to my red layer. I'm going to take number 13, the guy we just drew, put him in here, make sure it's perfectly centered, ungroup. And now we can jump over to the playground area. So let's grab this guy, for example. And all I have to do, because I have my components set up the way that I do, is I can open up this component. I can go to my head tenna, and I can drop down to 14. Nice. And you'll notice that it only picked up some of my layers, or some of the colors. That's fine. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say, okay, gray 1 is what I have the rest of the body set to. So I'm going to open up this 80993A6. This is that hex code I told you about. It becomes a handle. I'm going to switch this to gray 1. We're going to take that green, and I don't know, we can switch it to fuchsia, for example. So when I hand these off to Derp, or when he does the export, all he does is he pulls these straight out of Figma, and then his code controls those hex codes based off of whatever it is that he's, whichever layer that he's trying to manipulate. And that's it. Man, that went way longer than I thought it was gonna get. I thought it was gonna be. How do
That looks pretty clean.
Did that help? Was that a lot? Was that too much? Was that enough? Was it too slow?
Cool. I'm at work anyway, making my day go by faster.
Good.
It's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's sort of a left brain right brain exercise going from start to finish. Oftentimes, what I'll do arguably it's very difficult going from the ideation, sketching, creative side all the way through to Figma. I will rarely do that. My work process typically is something like, I'm up in the middle of the night, literally dreaming up different assets. Come in the morning and I'll just start sketching and drawing and getting inspiration. And I'll do a lot of like mechanical pieces at the same time. So, for example, the one that I just drew is very organic. Clearly, I'm not very good at fire, which is why we don't see a lot. And again, a lot of that's just because those fades and the transitions are tough. But excuses aside, I'm just not very good at it. So, what we just drew was something that was very organic. It had lots of flowing attributes. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't made of metal. It wasn't translucent or shiny. So I would likely draw 3 or 4 or 10 more assets kind of in that same style before then switching them all into Illustrator. I'll typically go through and do a dump of Illustrator of like 20 assets at a time. And then I'll spend 4 or 5 hours in Illustrator, not just separating up those layers and compressing them, but actually looking through all those fine details to make sure that shadows are where they're supposed to be, that there's no like lines protruding. Luckily, unlike some other projects, we get to say that we're hand drawn. So I'm okay if there's a couple of blemishes here and there. Like, it shouldn't look like a computer generation. In fact, I think it's a mistake if Derp gets to that level of polish where it looks like, there was no hand drawing involved whatsoever. I like the idea that circles aren't quite perfect, or sometimes there's a little bit of color outside the line. It gives it, in my opinion, it gives it that sort of authenticity that, this is literally just a guy drawing straight out of his head and pulling things straight into Figma. So I guess a better way of saying this, I try to stay true to the artwork and not do so much post editing in Illustrator that it's sort of taking away from that sort of free-handed drawing. But at the same time, there are definitely times I'll go into Illustrator and I'm like, oh yeah, that's going to look like shit if we actually try to mint that. So I'll make little changes here and there to fix those lines. And then we pull those into Figma, and then I literally message Chapman or Geek and I say, hey man, can you do another roll for me? What he'll do is take all those assets, hit the export button, dump them in his generator, and then we literally get a massive wall of PRED assets. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to show you. I won't show you the last roll because you guys are going to get to see those. No, you'll get to see them on Wednesday. Actually, this roll is already like 3 days old because it's already there's a whole bunch of assets that I haven't even put in here yet. But it's exciting. It's really cool seeing all this come together. And what's crazy is like this notion that whatever you draw, you're going to see it in one way or another, but you'll never actually end up seeing every single one of your creations. I mean, I guess theoretically I could grab Chapman's folder and I could scroll through all 20,000 of them, but I'm not going to, and even if I did, I wouldn't remember anyway. So it's fascinating, like seeing these things that you've drawn in billions of various combinations and styles, and then you guys come up with these insane backstories, and it's crazy. So the art has always been, especially with drapes, what kind of story or what kind of attributes can we draw that tell more of a story? Like, why is his ear bitten out? Or why is it so windy? Or why does he have a card in his mouth? Or whatever the case is. And so PRED has been a little bit different because unlike this massive backstory, all we really know is that there's just these sinister bad guys that are coming from their home planet to come and destroy Derpatonia. And so it's very much battle readiness. How do we create weapons? How do we create armor? How do we create something that looks sinister and threatening, like you guys have said, without just ripping off IP? I mean, how awesome would it be to put a Vegeta chest on one of these guys? I wish we could do that. It'd be so cool. The eyes. Number one, they're easy because I should say they're easy. There's not a lot of drawing, but my goodness, it requires such a level of creativity. I mean, so here, let me just give you an idea here. I'm gonna go back to my attributes layer. There are so many things you can do with just eyes alone, and this is it. There's not a whole lot to them, and yet when you see these eyes, it instantly transforms the personality of this pred. And this is just a human trait, right? Humans have always been drawn to eyeballs. It's one of the first things that we notice. And you'll also notice that throughout pred, I very rarely use. Oh yeah, so this is a mistake I need to fix. Do you guys see how I didn't combine that shadow into one layer? That should not look like that. You should not be able to see these separate pieces. Luckily, this is an easy fix. I just go into my vectors. No, I think it's these guys. I can go up here and I can flatten selection. There. Did you guys see the difference? Anyway, the eyes tell. Oh, I did it again. The eyes tell a big story. But the bodies are fun too. I mean, bodies. Oh yeah, there's your buff pred. Bodies really make it. I mean, this makes a whole different change as well. Yeah, so I guess that's it. I'm afraid of showing off too many more attributes because I'm like, ugh, there's so much little cleanup pieces I have to do. Cool, guys. Anything else? I probably have time for like one or two more questions, but then I should probably hop off and get back to work. Cool. Well, thanks for joining. And again, let me know if this was helpful or if it was too much or if you want to see something else next time. I'm happy to kind of change up the format. And yeah, I guess it'll be fun seeing those predator tentacles on Mint Day since you guys were helping to create that.
I have a quick question.
So,
Yeah, is there any age to the characters? And probably you covered this before, but I just wondered.
what do you mean?
I mean, some of the characters seem, like older, mature. Other ones seem a little fresh, wide-eyed. Do you think of age when you're doing it, or is it sort of universal?
That's a good point. I don't because I think there's this notion that they're all coming from the same bucket or the same grouping or the same in this case NFT batch, I guess. So I kind of like to think that they're all sort of the same age, but no, man, I haven't really. Dave probably has. Dave is sort of the lore guy. I'm the one that draws his visions and brings them to life. He's got a massive backstory. I think his white paper now is like 30 pages long or something ridiculous. So it's a lot of times it's a combination between the two. I try not to speculate too much on things because it's more fun to watch you guys come up with your own backstories. But B, as you guys know, if we say one thing and then we change that thing 2 months later, we get crucified. So we're very careful around the types of things that we reveal versus the types of things we keep secret.
Cool, thanks.
So I did have a question. I did want to ask. I was upstairs. So these individual trade assets, will you ever release a PNG with all the gamma in the background so we can get these memes done more easily? I really don't want to have to cut them all apart, man. That's so much work.
I don't know why. It feels like it's one thing to give you guys a tour of the bakery. It's another thing to hand over the recipe.
Yeah, that was like me having us make our own. Like,
Well,
NFTs,
I could just cut them apart, but you're just adding all that work. Like,
Yeah, I know, but that's part
the
of
end
it.
result's the same, but you're adding all that work that could go to making more memes instead. So what do you want me to do? You want me to do all that work when you could just, spend 5-10 minutes putting them together? And I
Yeah.
could put more of that time towards making memes?
So to
And
really
that's
run this
everyone,
the
not
wound
just me.
here, let me know when it's my turn.
Sorry.
Okay.
Done.
So to add even more salt to the wound, it wouldn't even take 5 to 10 minutes. I could hit the export button and just dump a folder, and it would take less than 30 seconds. But I'm not gonna do it. It's just one of those things where these assets, these tokens, these characters, these things, they're not meant to be seen broken up into pieces. They're meant to be one cohesive unit. So yeah, there are people like you and Highwind and plenty of artists out there who know how to break these things apart, but I don't want to make it that easy. If you guys want to create stuff, man, by all means rip it apart, tear it up, have your fun with it. But I'll never share the SVG files. I'll never
I'm not
share.
asking for SVG.
I know, but yeah, with a few exceptions, I know we've created a few emojis and stickers and stuff that have just that standalone piece, but yeah, I don't know, I don't it just I'll have to think on
Release as an NFT.
it. Well, I mean, if you guys haven't already figured it out, we're talking about customizing your own NFTs. At some point, we're gonna have to do that. We're gonna have to mint pieces of NFTs that people can then assemble themselves.
Yeah, just keep taking more money from me.
Yeah, that's the idea. Toy's so mad. He's like, that motherfucker.
Nah, man, it is what it is. If you're gonna have us cut it up, we'll cut it up. It's just, that's less time on making memes. So, it is what it is.
I'm beginning to think you think that the entire project is about making memes.
It's not.
Cool. All right, guys, I'm done. Again, I hope this was helpful. Hit me up in in Discord if you have any other questions. I'm gonna get back to drawing, and I guess we'll see you guys all on Tuesday.
That was great art. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.
Awesome.
See ya.